At what age does the average person actually hit a net worth of $100,000? Reaching six figures is a huge milestone. And for many people, it's a turning point. A stage where your financial choices start to determine whether you'll keep building wealth or end up plateauing. But here's the surprising part. Most people don't hit that $100,000 mark as early as you might think. The Federal Reserve regularly conducts studies on household net worth, reporting different measures of average wealth. In this video, we'll focus on the median, which is one of three main ways to measure an average. In this case, the median gives us a much clearer picture of what's typical for most people. The mean, however, can be misleading because a few extremely wealthy people can skew that number upwards, making it look like most people are doing much better than they actually are. The median, on the other hand, represents the middle part. Half of people have more and half have less, giving a much clearer picture of what a typical person actually has. According to the data, most people reach a six-figure net worth between the ages of 35 and 44, where the median net worth is $135,000. For those under 35, the median net worth is just $39,000. The data doesn't give a precise age, but it shows a clear range, and it's safe to say that most people reach a $100,000 net worth in their late 30s and early 40s. That might surprise a lot of people because we're often bombarded with social media images of young millionaires, early retirements, and people spending money like crazy. The truth is, most people build wealth more slowly, often in increments tied to certain important factors. It's important to note that these figures are based on households, not individuals. That means the numbers include all members living in the same household, singles, couples, or families in their combined assets and debt. Individual net worth would typically be lower, especially for younger adults. So, why do people hit six figures in their late 30s and early 40s? There are a few key reasons, and some of them you've probably never considered. First, marriage often plays a big role. When two people get married, their assets and debt combine into a single household net worth. While this doesn't always result in immediate gains, a couple's combined earning and saving potential is usually higher than an individual's. Though, it can also work in the opposite direction if spending habits aren't aligned. Picture two friends in their early 30s. One has managed to build a $40,000 net worth thanks to consistent 401k contributions and importantly no debt. The other though is in a different situation. They've got $20,000 in various assets but are carrying $50,000 in student loans, leaving them with a negative net worth of minus $30,000. Now if these two get married, their finances combine and suddenly their household net worth becomes $10,000. Marriage doesn't just merge incomes. It also means shared expenses, combined resources, and combined debt. Second, early career income is understandably pretty low. Most young adults are just getting started in entry-level jobs, trying to juggle student loans, rent, credit card bills, and all the cost of simply figuring out life after high school or college. It's actually really common for net worth to be negative in your 20s due to unsecured debt from student loans and credit cards. Picture someone fresh out of school. They've just started working, maybe making $30,000 or $40,000 per year, which barely covers living expenses, let alone leaves room for meaningful savings. Add in student debt and a car payment, and it can feel like no matter how hard they work, they're stuck at square one. At this point, most people are lucky if their net worth isn't negative. Between low starting salaries and all the new bills piling up, it's no wonder so many young adults kick off adulthood in the red, even when they're doing everything right. By the time people reach their 30s, things usually start to shift. Careers have often progressed, so incomes tend to increase, giving more room to save and invest. Debts like student loans or credit cards may have been partially or fully paid off, which provides a huge boost to net worth and helps bring it up out of the red. Even small, consistent savings and investment habits begin to make a noticeable difference at this stage. For example, someone who was barely scraping by in their 20s might now be contributing regularly to a retirement account, building an emergency fund, or putting money into low-cost index funds. The combination of higher income, reduced debt, and steady investing is what typically triggers the first meaningful surge in household net worth, setting the stage for reaching that six-figure milestone in the mid-30s and 40s. Third, owning a home is a huge and often the biggest factor driving net worth for this age group. Most people purchase their first home in their 30s, giving them a big opportunity to start growing wealth through home equity. Even though first-time home ownership has happened quite a bit later than in the past, those in their 30s and early 40s are still much more likely to own a home than anyone under 35. In that single purchase can have a huge, sometimes one-time impact on overall net worth. If your monthly costs for owning are similar to what you'd pay in rent, you're effectively building wealth with every payment through principal reduction, tax benefits, and most significantly, potential property appreciation. While housing prices can fluctuate in the short term, over the long run, a home often becomes the largest investment for people who might otherwise have little else. Even though this isn't necessarily a great thing. For example, if someone buys a home for $475,000 and it appreciates at a fairly typical 4% per year, the property could be worth over $580,000 in just 5 years. That's a $15,000 increase without factoring in any other assets or non-mortgage debt. That alone would push their net worth past $100,000. Finally, the first $100,000 is the hardest to achieve. Anyone who has built wealth will tell you that getting off the ground is often the most challenging part. Early savings grow slowly because compounding hasn't had enough time to make a noticeable impact. Even if people in their 20s invest in stocks, which would put them in the minority, the amounts they put in are usually small, so the gains are modest. For example, if someone puts a few hundred a month into a retirement account for a couple of years, the growth can feel extremely slow. On $10,000 invested in the S&P 500, an average annual return might only add about $1,000, which can make it seem like progress is barely anything. But here's the thing about hitting that $100,000 mark. Not all wealth is created equal. A person might have a six-figure net worth on paper, but still have little real financial security. Net worth simply measures everything you own minus what you owe. So yeah, it includes home equity, cars you own outright or that have equity, money in checking or savings, 401 kiloseconds, brokerage accounts, equity in a rental property, even a business that can be sold. But that doesn't mean all of it is actually working for you. Often just the opposite. Take a homeowner for example. Someone might see their net worth shoot up simply because home prices in their area jumped 20% over the last few years. Suddenly, they're worth $100,000 more than before, but they haven't saved or really invested a dime. If they're not actively putting money into compounding assets, like stocks and ETFs, retirement accounts, and other compounding investments, their net worth might look impressive initially, but it's unlikely to continue growing at a meaningful rate. That's the difference between on-paper wealth and compounding wealth. On-paper wealth is tied up in things like home equity or a car you own outright. It feels good, but it doesn't really build momentum. Compounding wealth, by contrast, comes from assets that grow on their own. The key difference is that instead of your net worth rising to $100,000 and then leveling off, it starts accelerating and snowballing over time, eventually growing at an unbelievable rate. But here's where most people unknowingly stall their wealth growth. When people reach this crossroads, many feel wealthy because their home equity has gone up. But they often overlook one key fact. That's usually the fastest gain they'll see unless they make investing a priority. Without investing their money, their net worth may continue to creep up as the house appreciates, but it won't grow in any meaningful way. That six-figure number can stagnate for years, which is frustrating when it feels like you're doing everything right. So, how does this happen? Many people do the basics right in their 20s and early 30s. They build up an emergency fund, pay down credit cards or student loans, and gradually increase their income. Then comes buying a house, and that's often where the progress slows. They see buying a house as the final major milestone they needed to reach. So investing never becomes a priority. Instead, any extra money goes towards things like upgrading cars every few years, moving into a bigger home with a higher mortgage and upkeep cost, taking nice vacations, and buying stuff they forget about after just a few hours. Purchases that make them look and feel wealthy. But because in their mind they've made it, none of that money ends up fueling compounding investments. But if you make the right choice at that crossroads and start putting a significant portion of your growing income into investments, your wealth can start growing much faster. With a larger base, compounding really kicks in. And every dollar you invest, save, or use to pay down debt has a bigger effect on your overall net worth. It's like rolling a snowball. Small at first, but as it grows, it gains unstoppable momentum. That's why reaching your first $100,000 takes the most time and patience. But once you hit it, you can decide to continue that progress, setting yourself up for much faster growth